Welcome again to the Circus of Fools series, our election podcast. This is episode 2. I'm Jonathan, here with my co-host Jim.
Yo.
And this time, it's going to be quite Labour-heavy. Don't worry, the Tories, well, they made their presence felt yet again, but this one's going to be quite Labour-heavy, mainly because they've been making some of the headlines. First of all, we'll go straight into it. Jess Phillips. Who is Jess Phillips? Well, she's an MP for the Labour Party, and she is currently in the headlines, but before we get to what she's done, firstly, a brief little history about her. She's been involved in a fair share of scandals, and the media usually protects her. She's had quite a few investigations into her financial affairs, carried out by the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards into her declaration of outside earnings. She basically didn't declare them within the limit. This includes tens of thousands of pounds for payments from appearing on Have I Got News for You, and including a book deal. So she's not exactly clean in terms of having a spotless record. And we'll go into this in a bit more detail when we get into the grit of the issue. She also laughed at the male suicide rate when an MP was bringing up male problems and mentioned it. She theatrically laughed. We'll play the clip a bit later, just so you guys have the full context of it. So let's get into what she's actually done. She's written a letter to the Prime Minister requesting that everyone's favourite former Prime Minister Liz Truss be deselected as an MP for appearing on the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, which is a conservative anti-SJW commentator programme that also has interviews with conservative commentators or even left-wing ones. There's debates and stuff on it. People like Carl Benjamin, Calvin Robinson, that Leo guy from GB News used to be a host there. There's Connor Tomlinson, I think it is. He goes on there, right? He's one of them as well. There's about 7 or 8 of them that are regularly hosted, as well as lots of guests. Jim, I'm not sure if you've actually seen the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, have you?
No, I didn't have the chance to see it, or even hear it for that matter. So,
it's got an audience, definitely. It's one of the bigger ones. So why is this important? Well, the letter basically has a lot of lies in it about the nature of this actual program, the Lotus Eaters program. It's just a conservative channel. Jess Phillips calls it far right. It is not far right. And she accuses them of basically spilling out conspiracy theories. I don't think they do. What Jess Phillips calls conspiracy theories in this letter, like the World Economic Forum taking over society, or things like the Great Replacement Theory, yeah, there are conspiracy theories surrounding them, I'm not denying it, but the way the Lotus Eaters actually present them, they don't say them as fact. They just have very rational discussions about them. And I'm not going to lie, they back up what they say with evidence. I don't always agree with what they say, but they are not far-right extremists. And if the World Economic Forum don't want people saying that they're interested in world domination, then they should stop talking about the Great Reset and talking about controlling people's brains by having chips put in place so they can monitor thought patterns to see when they stop concentrating. So they are an organization that kind of brings conspiracies on themselves, but the Lotus Eaters don't put out the conspiracy theories as truth. They have rational discussions about them. I do not always agree with what the podcast of the Lotus Eaters say by a long shot, but they are not far-right extremists. I've also never seen Carl Benjamin on this show or any of the other hosts incite any kind of violence towards women, which is what Jess Phillips accuses them of, and it's a lie that they are a reason for female MPs currently, if female MPs are currently living in fear, it's a lie that they're the cause of it, unless direct and articulate criticism about policies and conduct causes it. Bearing in mind that Jess Phillips got a name for not being able to take criticism during her failed leadership campaign, where she dropped out early because she just couldn't handle the scrutiny she was put under. Don't believe other people don't have this opinion? She's had problems with Navarra media. Ash Sarkar has basically accused her of this.
I'm really comfortable with Jess Phillips looking at all the things we do and going, I don't like that. Because guess what, Jess? The reason why Navarra media exists is because politicians like you on the Labour right have absolutely failed people in this country for decades now. Right? You weren't speaking to people's material needs. You certainly weren't speaking to a lot of people's social values. And I'm afraid that when people look at that wing of the party, what they see is a set of politicians who are venal, who are self-serving, and who also don't have any backbone. And you look at, I'm afraid, Jess Phillips herself. She markets herself as, I am resilient, I'm tough, I'm a straight talker. When she was standing for Labour leader, she threw in the towel after the first round. She couldn't take the heat. Now, that wasn't because, the left were mounting a particularly spirited campaign. I didn't think that was going on. When faced with really the mildest, kind of observation and questioning, she crumbled.
So she's not liked by independent media groups, if you can call them that, by independent media groups on the left or the right. She's universally hated on the independent scene. But I will give the full picture here. Carl Benjamin did say something incredibly stupid to her. So if people are raging saying you've omitted one thing that Carl Benjamin said to her, I haven't. I'm going to get into it now. In the past, while Carl Benjamin was running, just before Carl Benjamin decided to run as a UKIP MP, Euro MP, she's basically, her claims that he's, hates women, is violent towards them, all of that, comes from something he said to her. She basically made a tweet, and in response, Carl Benjamin said, I wouldn't even rape you. End quote. Comment was made, and he said it on Twitter. Personally, I think it was fucking stupid, just to give the full context, Jim, before I bring you in. Sorry, because I've realised I've been talking for a while. Just to give the full context before I bring you in. Carl Benjamin made that tweet, and then later on, he said it was just a joke. And he also said, when he was on stage, after referring to Jess Phillips as a bitch, that
this checks out, because everything they do or say in the parliament is a joke. So, yeah.
But he said that he made that comment because Jess Phillips felt it was acceptable to laugh at the male suicide rate, so he decided to balance that out with, if she's going to do that, basically, he said he was going to joke about rape. And, two rights don't make a wrong. He said that to get himself noticed. He made that comment to get himself notoriety. If you want to raise awareness of the male suicide rate, you don't conflate it with rape jokes, because the emphasis goes off of it, and you shouldn't make rape jokes anyway. But it was asking for trouble, is the point I'm making. And also, at the time, Carl Benjamin had a history of saying moronic things that were not reasonable as well, like when he said it depends on the child.
I was well under the age of 11 when I started having sex, and so what I like to do is put people on the other side of the argument. It's like, what you have to do is you have to say that someone like me, not anybody else, but me, that I was too stupid to appreciate the nature and quality of what I was doing at the time. So please convince me I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah, I think it depends on the child, really, doesn't it? Because some kids.
That's what the Catholics say.
So he's an internet at the time he was an internet loudmouth, just trying to get notoriety. He also had a habit of saying these things on other people's podcasts, so they would get their channels shut down, not his. But that's a video for another day. But yeah, Jim, like I said, that's pretty much what's gone on, and in relation to this, and that's the backstory between Carl Benjamin and Jess Phillips. They don't like each other.
Yeah, from what I heard, I don't like them either.
One thing I will say, it doesn't justify the rape comments Carl Benjamin made. They were abhorrent. Jess Phillips does laugh at the male suicide rate. Jim, we'll play the video of her doing that now. For me, she does, but we'll give full context of it. Jim, I don't know if you've seen the video. I'll play it now for the audience.
Because, of course, not only do we have International Women's Day, we also have women and equality questions every month in the Chamber, which we don't have for men. So the opportunity for men to raise issues that are important to them is very limited. And just to give you a flavour, Mr. Chairman, of the type of things that may come up and which will be part of International Men's Day, I'm not entirely sure why it's so humorous, but to discuss issues such as men's shorter life expectancy, wider male health issues, many of which go unreported through embarrassment of men to sort of go along and talk about these things.
You have to excuse me for laughing, that the idea that men don't have the opportunity to ask questions in this place is a frankly laughable thing. As I say, as the only woman on this committee, it seems like every day to me is.
Well, I wasn't making, with respect, I wasn't making that point. I wasn't making the point that men don't have an opportunity to ask. I was about men's issues. There's a very big difference between men raising issues and the raising of men's issues.
I think we should treat women the same as men. And that means if a woman is being a giant bitch and laughing at male suicide, I'm going to be a giant dick back to her.
So you can see from the clip, male suicide rate isn't specifically mentioned, but the MP does mention shorter male lifespans, which includes things like it's accepted that the umbrella of those includes prostate cancer and male suicide. Those are the two main ones. There are others in there I fully appreciate. And she makes a point of theatrically laughing her head off, putting it on the table. It's so condescending, and the hubris exhibited just makes her look like a foul human being. And I can see exactly why Carl Benjamin loses his temper on that stage. And I'll show that. Hopefully, I've shown the footage of that as well, where he called her a bitch, saying if she's gonna laugh at the male suicide rate, which is what she did. Now, she did get the lawyers out saying, I've just been lied about on stage. No, you haven't, Jess Phillips. You did laugh at the male suicide rate. You did laugh at prostate cancer. Whenever people talk about men's shorter lifespans, that's what they're talking about. And you did laugh your head off at them. And what I would say is, she left herself wide open to that criticism. And if she doesn't, there were ways to criticize without laughing at those issues. And it really just, for me, shows what she is. Jim,
Indeed.
what do you think?
Yeah, you pretty much covered it. Yeah.
And like I said, she for me, it's why the Labour Party even allow her to stand. I've got no idea.
Because they ran out of options.
Mm.
I mean, who else is there?
True. I think she's worse than Diane Abbott, which, we'll be covering her later as well. But, just getting back to it as well, that, that's the backstory, that was the exchange between them, that's Jess Phillips' background. In short, these two have a history. Now, LBC, a media outlet, originally backed Jess Phillips, but then deleted their tweets backing her. Because that letter was so much full of shit that they couldn't actually back that. So, what happened with the actual interview? Well, I've seen it, and while I didn't agree with a lot of what Liz Truss said, the interview, firstly, wasn't carried out by Carl Benjamin. It was carried out by the other one, Connor Tomlinson, I think his name is. You frequently see him on Sky News and GB News Talk TV. So he's kind of integrated into the mainstream media already. You don't really see Carl Benjamin on those outlets, though, for obvious reasons. While I agree with some of the sentiments Carl Benjamin made, you can't go around on stage calling MPs giant bitches and swearing and things like that. You can't go around saying what he said in the past and expect mainstream media want anything to do with you. So Carl Benjamin's off the mainstream. The podcast of the Lotus Eaters is very connected to mainstream stations. They are. But you'll not see Carl Benjamin on them very much because, of that background, and he's done that to himself with the stupid things he said. But like I said, I disagree with some of Liz Truss's takes. It was more about promoting a book. She was talking about things like Whitehall, the economy, and immigration. There were no conspiracy theories. It was a pretty tame interview, to be honest. And it was just Truss talking about a book, and Connor Tomlinson fanboying over her. So, in essence, nothing about this letter is justified. And I think it's Jess Phillips maybe trying to get a bit of relevance during the election, but as was said before, she has got a problem with independent media. Now, I said before, what can be passed as independent media? For me, this is like Navarra Media, Podcast of the Lotus Eaters. This is more with Navarra Media, but they've toned down a lot of their product. Like, for example, they used to do real in-depth criticism of the Westminster lobby journalists, and now they've kind of toned that down. They don't go into the detail that they used to. Like, they don't show footage that wasn't really shown to the public and all kinds, and I wonder if they've done that to be able to go on GB News, which has, of course, got a Westminster lobby journal, or go back onto things like Sky or Sky, because they've gone on BBC anyway. But that's a video for another day. I mean, maybe, leave a comment about that. Do you think that independent journalists, things like Navarra Media, Podcast of Lotus Eaters, Mehar Tusai, who, by the way, has been on Murdoch Empire money for a few years, do you think they are independent outlets, or do you think they do have connections? Let us know, and if you want us to do a video on it, we'll discuss that. But regardless of that, whatever these entities are, Jess Phillips has got a history of having a problem with them. She's part of the mainstream media club, and the mainstream media, like I say, they do protect her. For me, I just don't think she likes the way these independent outlets aren't completely under the control of the mainstream media and actually criticize her. She doesn't seem to be able to handle criticism. Although, again, the I wouldn't even rape you comments were abhorrent. Carl Benjamin should not have said them. He is completely undermined in this because of those stupid comments. Sorry, Jim, I didn't mean to talk like an authority there.
No. You pretty much covered everything I had to say. But from my perspective, that's a case of having a bad filter with bad judgment while also trying to stay relevant because the elections are coming and you get situations like this.
Yeah, but like I said, on this channel, I don't think Jim and I are fans of Jess Phillips, and we are certainly not fans of Carl Benjamin either, but I have more respect for Carl Benjamin because even though we said those stupid comments, I can't see why he was so pissed off at her, because, it was foul how she was laughing at shorter men's life expectancy, which again, when you say that, you bring up the bubble of men's suicide, prostate cancer, and the rest of them. Again, if that argument of whether men talk about issues, whether they should talk about issues or not, or whether men don't have the ability to ask about things, that is, you can respond to that in a different way than laughing at it, than laughing at those ideas. And the timing of her laughs were insane. She literally bursts out laughing, and it's theatrical. She does it deliberately. She bursts out laughing at the exact moment that men's shorter life expectancies are mentioned. She must be an idiot.
She must be an idiot, or she tried to pull a book from the extreme left/political correct agenda, where if you're white and male, you're instantly hated.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the first segment done. I don't really have much else to say about Jess Phillips' current situation, aside from, God, I hope she loses her seat.
Yeah, I hope so as well. But the thing is, Labour has very few people that they can replace her with, so it might be the case that she remains where she is.
Yeah, she's a seat that I'll be looking at effectively during this election, just because I am interested to see if she loses. I don't think she will, to be quite frank. I'll admit I am very guilty here that I have not even bothered to look at whether she has a majority or not, because before this I didn't even give her a second thought.
I don't think she does, but yeah, we'll just wait and see when the time comes. It's going to be an interesting surprise. It will give us something to comment.
Also, the specific numbers. She didn't declare a £16,000 book payment deal, and I've forgotten what the Have I Got News for You one was, but it was over 10,000 what she got for Have I Got News for You. So she's that never made it to the mainstream media either, so she got away with that. But moving on to the next segment, Diane Abbott. Now, why is Diane Abbott a Labour MP in the news? Why was she in the news? It's more or less died down now, but Diane Abbott is currently an MP for Labour. She basically claimed that she was told that she wasn't allowed to stand as an MP for Labour this election, and at one point was saying she wanted to stand as an independent. Starmer denied, saying that it was decided. He's now said that she can stand as a Labour MP. She did have the whip returned to her, by the way, when she was claiming that she was banned. During this purgatory she was in, like I said, during this purgatory she was in, she did have the whip restored, which was strange. Before we get into whether Diane Abbott deserved this or not, the reason why they were saying she was banned from standing is because she was investigated last year for a letter she wrote in a newspaper claiming that Jews have never experienced racism effectively. I'll get the exact quote, and we'll go into the exact quote later on, but for now...
I have to say for this is based.
Yeah, it's
quite a based opinion.
Yeah, it was very polarizing. The thing is, just a headline waiting to happen every time she speaks, but just to get the stuff about Starmer out of the way, this tells me Starmer doesn't have full control of the party, or maybe he was testing the water to see if he could get away with getting rid of her without it causing a stir or getting some attention, see if he could just quietly get rid of her. Because this was said to be a part of a purge of the left, which we're also going to go into, where he's removing left-wing candidates from being able to run, because he has done it to a few. And I'm not sure this was included in that. I think that, Diane Abbott, to put it bluntly, let's put it this way. A lot of right-wingers say that she's thick as pig shit, to put it bluntly. And whenever the left-wingers talk about her, they just say the following things. She is a trailblazer. She has many accomplishments. What are those accomplishments? She is loved by her constituents. Now, she has got one accomplishment. She was the first black female MP. So in that way, I will say she's a trailblazer. And we're not saying on this channel that she has not ever experienced racism. She has. She's probably experienced a lot. The report that's come out, pretty much confirmed that. And there's been some horrendous things said about her by right-wing commentators. She has experienced racism. So putting that aside, we do acknowledge that.
But two wrongs don't make a right.
Yep, two wrongs do not make a right at all. And those comments she made about Jews were out of line. But before we get into that, we've spoken about the accomplishments she supposedly has. I don't think she has any. Personally, my opinion is when she was younger, she was a mediocrity. And as she got older, she started to deteriorate because she has made some blunders, and every time it got to the point where at one point, every time she went public with something, she would just be a headline waiting to happen. So she was kind of becoming the embarrassment to the party because of stuff she was saying, which gradually got worse. So, at best she could repeat party lines and sometimes say the right thing, but like I said before, as she got older, she seems to have deteriorated, and her judgment calls, as well as her performances, leave a lot to be desired. I kind of agree that right now she is a liability, and she's just not that clever. So, why do I say that? Well, here are some clips. The first one is an interview that she had a few years ago on Times Radio, I think it was 2021, with Kathy Newman. I'll play the clip now.
Well, you talk about policies, but name one policy which you would like Keir to embrace that he doesn't already.
Well, the idea that we should have a policy on followery, on issues in relation to ordinary issues in relation to giving people free access to free quantity, free access to free actual recovery. I mean, I think, when the main thing is that when Keir became leader, he seemed to promise that he would hold on to the best policies of the 2017 and 2019 election. And he seems to have moved away from that. And I think that's a little bit of a mistake. But, early...
Now that I've played the clip, what I was saying about how she can repeat things, but once she was asked, can you actually name a policy you would like to see? She can't do it, and she becomes incoherent, inarticulate. She's making phrases with no subject. She sounds drunk, to be quite honest, or medicated. I mean, what's your take on it, Jim?
I think she contracted the Biden germ, the Biden virus, which would explain why she speaks like that. But yeah, honestly, this is at least embarrassing to share, to be in a position of power, to do an interview like that, or to be, candidate for a position of power and do an interview like that. This is embarrassing. How did you even get to the point where you are if you're unable to speak as a thinking human being? Like, what sort of skills do you have justifying the position you're in if you speak and behave like that? Because this is supposed to be a person who's part of the group of people that are responsible and in charge of navigating the country and solving its problems. And seeing that behavior, like, I feel, okay, it's a fucking circus.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons why everything is going to shit. And the worst thing is, in every single industry, in the private sector, if you behave like that, if you're unable to perform your duties, they fire you. We don't see that though in the parliament. You have incompetent person upon incompetent person, and they keep piling up.
Yeah, and yeah, I fully agree. I mean, like I said, because we do want to emphasize on the channel, we are aware that she's had racial abuse, but this has got nothing to do with her race. This is a performance that she's had in an interview.
Yeah, this is like the racial abuse she suffered is like one event.
It's one aspect. She's had multiple events of it.
But this doesn't correlate with the fact that here in this interview she sounds like a drunk fuck.
Yeah.
Unable to formulate a sentence, unable to speak. So
it's the fact as well.
There's no correlation between the two events, is what I'm trying to get at.
Oh yeah, they're completely
one
separate.
One didn't cause the other. It's two separate things.
It's the fact as well that as soon as she gets off the question that she wasn't expecting, she can go right back into regurgitating party lines. If that makes sense. Towards the end of the clip, she becomes coherent again. So she got thrown a curveball and just couldn't articulate any kind of expression in a way that deflected the question. And I like I said, I'm going to be a bit harsh and say I don't think she's ever been particularly that clever. I've seen her on Question Time when MP's expenses scandal was at an all-time high, and the population was just furious at it because of the liberties they were taking. And a journalist next to her on Question Time basically said MP should be paid more. And Michael Heseltine knew to keep a stone face with no emotion showing and not react to that, while she had a big smile on her face, nodding her head, not realising the damage that would do to the Labour Party's image. I think that she's never been particularly that clever. I don't agree that she's thick as pig shit, but I do think she's a mediocrity. But I do think that some people, as they get older, they kind of deteriorate intellectually. And I think she's one of them. She's deteriorated a bit as she's gotten older. And like I said, the judgment calls just are not there. So The next one was the Nick Ferrari interview. This isn't the Nick Ferrari interview directly. This is her listening to the Nick Ferrari interview, which is a bit better because you then get her response to the interview performance.
So how much would 10,000 police officers cost?
Well, if we recruit the 10,000 police men and women over a 4-year period, we believe it'll be about £300,000.
£300,000 for 10,000 police officers? What are you paying them?
No, I mean, sorry.
How much will they cost?
It will cost about £80 million.
About £80 million?
Yeah.
Diana, but that is hugely embarrassing. It's not just misspeaking, to quote you a bit earlier. You just don't know your figures and you're not on top of your brief.
If I didn't know my figures, why was I able to do 6 other interviews and give the figures correctly? And you need to ask why the Conservative Party is so anxious to move the debate away from the 20,000 police officers.
We'll come on to that because we're going to speak to a Conservative in just a moment. But back to that interview. Never mind that you did 6 or 7 interviews. This is now an election campaign. Front benchers and government ministers are expected to do reams of interviews. This was a major policy announcement for you. By your own words, you want to make this a cornerstone of your manifesto. You didn't know the figures.
I did know my figures, and if you'd listened...
Why didn't you say them then?
Because I misspoke, as you heard. If I didn't know my figures, I wouldn't have been able to repeat them correctly in 6 other interviews.
Which interviews did you correct them? Because I listened to one of those interviews. You didn't mention the figures at all. You said it was all going to be costed and it would be in the manifesto.
I did 6 other interviews. The point
But
is...
you didn't mention the figures in those other interviews. You decided to talk about the figures, and they are basic figures. £300,000, which, as Nick Ferrari said, would have meant £30 per police officer. That's embarrassing. You were then struggling to correct that figure. Did you actually not know them at all and you were guessing when you were asked about it on air? Or what is your explanation?
I knew the figures because I've repeated them many times.
You haven't. I haven't heard you repeat them at all. I've just heard them from that interview.
I can repeat them now. And I'm concerned that you don't want to talk about policing, which is something the public is concerned in, particularly the rise in violent crime. And you do want to go over and over. And Nick Ferrari...
But that's your fault, Diana. But, I mean, you want to talk about the issue, and we were all prepared to talk about the issue of policing.
My goodness, people wonder why Labour weren't taken seriously as opposition for a while. She was the Shadow Home Secretary when she made those errors. You know, again, it's the case of she can regurgitate what she's told, but it seems like she didn't know the figures, definitely. I mean, I don't dispute that. She didn't know the figures. It seems like she doesn't even understand what she's saying half the time. If I were to say to you, Jim, that, you know, that number of officers with that amount of money, I would pick up immediately that I've just misspoken. I would know immediately I've just made a mistake. Because it doesn't sound right.
Yeah. I mean, she just did guesswork because it's like the kids, you know, when they write history tests and they don't know the exact date, so they guess the date. It's the exact same thing.
Yeah.
That's exactly what she did.
And, I mean, it doesn't stop there. Here's some of the previous statements she's actually made before as well. So the first one was, she reportedly said that blonde-haired, blue-eyed Finnish girls were unfit to be nurses because they had never met a black person before. It was Sky News that reported that a few years ago.
I mean, that's actually accurate because everyone knows that, you know, the physiology of a black man is different to the physiology of a white man. Like their organs are all different. I even heard black men have their hearts to their heads, not on the left side of the chest.
She also said West Indian.
Man.
She
and
also
this person
said,
is still in her position.
Yeah, and people came out to demonstrate for her. Now, I have no idea whether she's going to win or not. I mean, she's on the Labour ticket now, so I can't see her not winning. But it's likely she'll be elected as a Labour MP. And here's the other one. West Indian mums will go to the wall for their children. On its own, harmless, but what she was accused of was saying that, she was inferring that white women won't, type thing. You know, it invited that opposition, it invited those questions. So it was more negative headlines. And then, what I was talking about earlier, the thing that got her suspended briefly was writing an article in which she said, quoting, "Jews have not faced racism their whole lives." So, now that I've said all of that, Jim, with those comments and things, I guess the discussion point is, should she be told to stand down as a Labour MP?
Yeah, I think she would be kicked off the parliament. As I
Mhm.
said before, the moment you display, sorry, I'll be fair, not the moment you display, but when you repeatedly display that you're unable to do your job, you're being fired.
Mm.
I mean, fuck, people have been fired for less from their jobs.
Yeah.
What the fuck is she doing there?
Left-wingers defend her saying, "Oh, well, she's not had a chance to have many accomplishments because she's been in opposition for a long time." Maybe some truth to that. I mean, she has been in the
But
incumbent government,
opposition is
but
the easiest fucking job in the world. All you have to do is say no. It's
I
so
know.
easy. Our Communist Party, quite a few years back now, said, okay, don't elect us because we prefer being the opposition, because that's exactly what they were doing. They were
It's
being
also the
vocal about shit that the government was doing, which, okay,
Mm.
they were right because all our governments have been shit back in Greece. But yeah, they've been vocal advocating against what the government was doing, basically saying
It's
no, and
Mm.
it worked. That's all you have to do as the opposition. If you
Yeah.
can't even do that, I mean, come on, just show yourself out already.
It's also the fact as well. I mean, do you not think that maybe she's contributing to them at the time? Is it maybe she contributed to them being stuck in opposition for a long time?
I would argue, that's also the case.
Mm.
But I don't understand for the life of us. I think the only reason why they can't kick her out is because they're going to be afraid it's going to be like some sort of racial thing, saying, "Oh, you kicked her out because she was black." No, we kicked her out because she was a fucking idiot.
Yeah.
Can't you even hear her speak? Like, she clearly, if she can't even invest time to learn the basic points of her own campaign,
Yeah.
that shows you how much she cares, which is
She,
not much.
she did. I'm not saying this justifies anything. I just need to go on record and say she did apologize for the remarks she wrote in that article about Jews. One thing I will say is for
Yeah,
me,
but this is
yeah,
like the list of the problems.
yeah, absolutely. For me, I would say I would have stuck by my guns and said, yeah, stand down as a Labour MP, just because when you win, because Labour are going to win, when you win this election, the first few months, because of the shit that the Tories will have left them in, they're going to be crucial. And you want you want to be as secure as possible. And I think someone like Diane Abbott is going to bring a lot of criticism towards the party. Potentially, she's a liability. And if she does more things like this, it's going to unsettle the party in the first few months. So I personally would have used this as an excuse to get rid of her. But that's just my personal opinion. Just meanwhile, an MP who is not a liability to the party, she's actually made herself popular in her constituency that she was running in. She's been told to step down. This is Faiza Shaheen. And she made the Labour Party more popular in her constituency when she was campaigning. This was her statement. "I am heartbroken at this decision, but it does not come as a surprise. It is the end of a systemic campaign of racism, Islamophobia, and bullying from some within the party, which began when I first announced that I wanted to run for Labour again. There are numerous examples of how I have been singled out for unfair treatment. This includes being banned from speaking publicly about my experiences of racism within the party, stripped of a paid party organizer when 7.5 months pregnant, the only candidate in a key marginal seat to not have one, and told to curb the attitude when I raised that Labour was not taking the concerns of the Muslim community seriously enough. I have not experienced this level of relentless hostility in all my personal or professional life, not even from the Conservatives." Now, there's a lot in that statement, but I think she has got a point in one aspect, in multiple aspects there. But the thing with Faiza Shaheen, she never brought any negative headlines the way Diane Abbott did. She became very popular in her constituency from the ground up, and it sounds like the Labour Party, from what she said, if true, basically cut the nuts off of her campaign. And like Diane Abbott, she experienced racism as well. So, I don't think it's fair that Diane Abbott's decision has been reversed, but hers hasn't,
I agree. Also, aren't the Labour supposed to be inclusive?
You would think. But the Foster
So what's
report
happening
really
here?
exposed a lot.
What's happening here? Are we being lied to?
Who would have guessed? If anyone's wondering on this channel, well, I'm not going to say we're left wing. Jim and I have views, and we're good friends, and we can agree to disagree on a lot as well. That's why you get good debate on this show. I'm left wing, but what I'll say about Jim and I, we are not fans of the establishment.
No.
And we are not fans of the Labour Party, the Tory Party, Liberal Democrats, anyone. We don't like any of them.
No. And suddenly we came up with some very interesting solutions on how we could resolve the problems in politics. The problem is we don't want the channel to be demonetized, so yeah.
But yeah, that's all I've got to say on the Diane Abbott case. And obviously crossing into how a lot of good left-wing candidates are being gotten rid of that don't have this history of just producing headline after headline after headline. And like with the case with Faiza Shaheen, it seems like her, campaign just got the nuts cut off of it, but she still managed to become very popular in her constituency. They're mad not letting her specifically run because it did look like she was going to win, and it's quite heartbreaking the way she found out as well. She just got a random phone call, I think, saying, by the way, while she was on the campaign trail, she was basically saying that they rang her up and just said, "Yeah, you're not standing anymore." But beyond that, I've not really got a lot to say on it. Have you got anything else to say?
No.
Okay. So the next segment, this will probably be a short one. Journalism crossing into politics. This is nothing new. This has been going on for decades. The latest one is Ian Dale, a journalist and presenter from LBC, was going to run as a Tory party candidate during this election for Turnbridge Wells, which enjoyed a majority of 24,000. So he must have had some influential connections to get that seat. He must have had some connections to have been allowed to have been selected to run in that seat and ride the Tory ticket on that one. However, after quitting his LBC show to pursue this, footage emerged of him saying he never liked Turnbridge Wells and he would, quote, quite happily live somewhere else. Because this emerged, he stood down. I mean, if it wasn't for the quite happily live somewhere else, he could have spanned that and said, yeah, I didn't like living there because there was so much wrong with it. Here's how I'm going to fix it. But that's just what I would have said anyway. But I would have happily lived somewhere else kind of nukes that. But being serious here, just before I bring you in, Jim, just to finish the point. Being serious, though, there is a conflict of interest when it comes to the press and their relationship with politicians. They communicate in the same WhatsApp groups. They coexist in the same WhatsApp groups. They go to the same parties, like, for example, the Murdoch Summer Party, which sees Murdoch Empire journalists and, other ones interacting with Sunak and Starmer, or other politicians at the same party. Their children go to the same schools, and more directly, we see professional relationships. Joey Jones was the press advisor to Theresa May during her election, and prior to that, before he went on to do that, he was the deputy political editor for Sky News, and he was a Westminster lobby journalist at that. There's already the accusation that Fiona Bruce, the BBC journal, whose husband has received cash for advertising for the Tory party. Boris Johnson used to be a journalist, for fuck's sake. And one of the current political editors used to be an assistant to an MP. And, just to finish off the point, just one last thing, because of the potential lucrative political careers that a lot of Westminster lobby journalists want, they will refuse to investigate things because they might lose current access, or they will pursue agendas or present narratives, or even omit or softball questions to stay in the Westminster bubble itself. That's in addition to the narratives of their actual news channels. So, Jim, what do you make of that one?
Yeah, I mean, it's always been a public secret that the government has ties with the press. And you can see that because each sort of news outlet have their own spin and agenda on things. I mean, a good example, like, when the Russian-Ukraine war started, there was the incident with the dam. You would see two out of news outlets saying Putin blew up the dam as a title on a video, and the other two were saying the dam was blown up and caused X amount of damage. And this is just one case how news outlets can spin a narrative. And of course, I would even argue that depending, each party basically has bought certain power on certain news outlets. So yeah, there's definitely, dealings under the table in what can and what cannot be said. That's it. Everyone knows that. It's one of the reasons why people, don't trust the mainstream media and they try to turn to independent media as a means to be informed on what's happening in the world.
Oh no, I absolutely agree. It was also very telling as well when Zelensky came over to the UK and stood next to Sunak, and you had the Ukrainian journalists sitting next to the Westminster lobby journalists, and none of the Westminster lobby journalists were just asking these really spineless softball questions. And then you had a Ukrainian journalist ask Rishi Sunak about the amount of Russian money flowing through Westminster in London.
What are your steps to clear the reputation of London as a city that is still laundering Russian money? Thank you.
Okay. And with regard to sanctions, I think as you saw at the beginning of this conflict, I used to be the finance minister, and we put in place, the President talked about it earlier today, probably the most extensive and forward-leaning sanctions package of any country at the beginning of this conflict.
And it just shamed the lobby.
Yeah. I mean, compare that interview to the one that Clarkson did with Putin, which, by the way, we're not fan of Clarkson or Putin, as we already said. But if you compare the two interviews, you can see, it's as much shit as we can give to Clarkson. This interview was actually one of the better ones he's done, I would say. Which says a lot.
Oh, no. Do you know what's really funny as well, just on that, mentioning Putin? You have Rishi Sunak, who can't interact with ordinary people, and whenever he does, he just looks unelectable. Yet you have Putin, one of the most evil people on the planet right now. The Turkmenistan president gave him a puppy for his birthday, and he picked the puppy up by the scruff of the neck. And Putin looked really uncomfortable and just got up and took the puppy and held it and stroked it, and then let it run around the room, his office, and laughed it off. And I'm just thinking, why is it that someone like Putin can take an uncomfortable situation and immediately fix it and look electable, and the Tories and the politicians of the Western nations can't do that?
Because for all the shit that Putin has done, he has some sort of degree of intelligence, presence, and leadership skills, as opposed to the politicians here in the UK, which have none of that.
Yep.
But they somehow spring there like wild weeds,
It's just the fact as well that people have seen that and they're like, oh man, I'd vote for Putin after seeing him with the puppy.
I mean, between Sunak, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, Biden, Trump, Thatcher, I would still vote for Putin. Oh, sorry. And I'll even include the Greek prime ministers as well.
That's how you know, the thing is, they actually did polls where British people were saying that as well, because they hate their own. It comes from more hating their own politicians than a pro-Putin thing. It's just basically a declaration of spite. But that's how much people hate their domestic politicians right now.
The thing is, though, on a serious note, when you reach a point where you hate every single candidate in your government, you look for alternative solutions and you get even more angry. This is why Trump is now, in front, because it's something different, anti-establishment. And in Greece, a couple of years ago, it was the first time ever that the far-right extremist party, which is borderline Nazi, got enough votes to get into the parliament. This had never happened before in the history of Greece. And the reason why it's happened is because at that point, everyone had tried every other single option. And you know what? They said, fuck it.
Yep.
People are fed up and cornered with the options presented to them in terms of leadership. They vote and they know they're pretty much gonna eat dick for the next 4 years, no matter who comes up.
Yeah.
And that is a very depressing thought to have.
Then on that, the depressing thought of candidates, unless you've got something to say about the Ian Dale thing any further, we can move on to the next segment.
No, not really.
Cool.
Let's cover
So this is going to be a very quick one because yes, we know that the debates are on today, but this is being recorded before them, so we won't be able to cover them. So until next week, and also next week, yes, we'll be talking about Nigel Farage either later this week or next week, just because again he emerged as we were preparing. So with his U-turn. So there are going to be TV debates. The first of which will be on June the 4th on the BBC, and the second will be on the 26th of June on ITV. Apparently, Starmer had agreed to these because these are the news stations with the biggest audiences. And to be honest, there may be some truth to that. It would certainly explain why Sky News and GB News, aren't being included. And I think it's funny that Talk TV didn't even make it until the elections. But I do wonder if it's got to do with political leanings as well. It also does speak volumes that Laura Koonsberg isn't hosting the BBC one. But what hasn't been talked about is that, well, according to some newspapers, including The Guardian, as far as you can trust The Guardian, Rishi Sunak wanted 6 debates with Starmer between June the 4th and July the 4th. Starmer naturally refused. I think for all of our benefits. I mean, would you want to watch 6 debates with these two?
No.
I really wouldn't either.
It would be torture.
It would be. I mean, the thing is, right, debates being entertaining depend very much on the context. I don't want to go into too much. Just to give a brief example, when people wanted Donald Trump or Joe Biden, it was basically people watched Donald Trump for the entertainment value, and they were hoping that Joe Biden would make a fool of himself, or basically lose his temper and do something. There was the entertainment value of that. People, and also you had 2 candidates that were very polarizing. Trump is so polarizing that the person who was standing against him would always get attention. In this case, as I said before, the debates depend very much on the charisma of the candidates, and for the casual audience, we have 2 charismatic black holes running this time. And I think 6 would get boring very quickly, as both Starmer and Sunak would just give the same answers to the same talking points over and over again, and the mainstream media wouldn't select the interesting ones, just preferred ones of the candidates. Add to that, I don't think, like I said, I think 6 debates would be very detrimental to both candidates. You would get sick of seeing them. And neither of them, to be honest, are, just because they look so awkward when they speak, like Starmer just comes across as a robot regurgitating the lines, while Sunak is just very condescending and tends to talk to the audience like children. Seeing them physically just puts you off of them because of their mannerisms, you know what I mean? Combined with their voices.
Yeah.
I think it would do more harm than good. It's not just that. Debates require a lot of time that can be better spent campaigning. I can fully understand why Rishi Sunak doesn't want to campaign anymore with the things that have gone wrong. Again, things like physical appearance, vocal tones, facial expressions, demeanors, and inability to answer questions, which both of these candidates suffer from, can affect an audience perception, and I don't think either candidate would benefit from this again. Furthermore, and this is just the truth, Starmer's in a position where he doesn't fucking need to. He's got a gigantic lead that he just needs to hang on to. He's not going to lose this election. People just hate the Tories so much, it's in the bag for him. If Starmer cannot win this election, then he should stand down as a fucking MP. And Labour really needs to take a long, hard look at itself as to how it threw this one away. And I don't think he's going to lose any votes refusing to do any debates. And I think the Tories were hoping, oh, he's refusing to debate us every single week. But I don't think the voter base kind of cares enough, because the Tories have already admitted that the electorate aren't listening to them. Debates kind of became normalized during the Cameron Brown election, but that was because Cameron didn't realize what a limited IQ that he had. And during the first one, he was unable to answer any questions with relevant answers. Instead, he went off on tangent stories, after which Clegg and Brown would answer, and Cameron would stand there dumbstruck, not knowing why he wasn't getting applauded. So, and then you had obviously Theresa May, who didn't turn up to one, and then had Amber Rudd sent in her place. So, debates really, they're normally not very entertaining in the UK, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, it's like watching...
paint dry.
Yeah, Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, hopefully, if there are going to be debates. There's going to be two of them. Hopefully, things like the millions that Sunak made from hedge funds taking bets against the pound. When it dropped because of things like Brexit and the austerity plans from Cameron and Osborne, or the fact that Jeremy Hunt, what should
that's
be
quite an
criminally,
interesting business idea. Become prime minister,
it happens all the time.
bet on your own currency to drop as you are the prime minister, then drive your own economy to the ground, so you cash out the money. Easy
Well, it's
peasy.
in addition to literally betting that it's going to drop, because there is actually an economist who made his money by betting on the economy. It's also investing in things knowing the pound's going to drop. You know what I mean? Basically taking advantage of the pound dropping, not because insider trading happens frequently and it should be criminal. But also, I mean, it is illegal. But these hedge funds shouldn't be allowed because remember, the Westminster Lobby Press make money out of these hedge funds as well whenever they go on, which is why they like their access because they can get involved in them and make money from them. Whenever there's lobbying, the press make money from it just as much as the politicians do. But also, I hope Jeremy Hunt's what should be criminal attitude towards the pandemic gets brought up as well, because the public should be made aware of when Jeremy Hunt was health secretary before the pandemic. He was given exercises. I think it was the Cygnus report or something. He was given an exercise. There was supposed to be a drill to prepare or a report that would talk about Britain's preparedness for a pandemic when Jeremy Hunt was health secretary. It was called Project Cygnus or something like that. And basically, he would not engage with this at all. And the report found that decisions would have to be made, like who would be prioritized for ventilators. And Jeremy Hunt didn't like making decisions like that, even in an exercise, despite the fact he was the health secretary and it was his job. So he didn't at all engage with this exercise, even though it came to the conclusion that we didn't have enough equipment, we didn't have enough PPE, mainly because a lot of it was sold to China. We didn't have enough respirators, and the NHS was not prepared for a pandemic should it happen. And because Hunt just didn't want to engage with this report, Britain was left woefully unprepared for the pandemic, and I hope that gets brought up as well. But it won't, and that should have been criminal negligence right there, because people died because of that. And these debates should highlight that the Tories had at one point the Tories had the highest death count in Europe for the pandemic. There were all like the care home scandal, the parties, everything. This party is going to lose, but this party should not be able to win a single seat for the stuff that it's done.
Yeah, but now it's already ancient history.
Yeah.
I mean, what everyone remembers from the parties is like, okay, Boris Johnson was in power. Now Boris Johnson is not in power, so it's not the party's fault. It's Boris Johnson's
It was his fault.
So sadly, that's what people remember.
And obviously, these debates aren't going to highlight any of that. So unless there's some really funny fuck-ups, or in case the journalists decide to give them some oddball questions, bearing in mind, guys, as well, right? If you see audience members asking questions of the politicians in these debates, I don't know if they're going to do that. You are going to get plants. Just a side note as well, I think one of the reasons why Nigel Farage has come back into politics and wants to run as an MP is because he wants to get into these debates if he can. I know that the BBC are having a programme after the debate, which is going to invite the Reform leader on, along with other party leaders. And I think Nigel Farage wants to be in these debates, even though he might not be in the main ones. He wants to be in all these election special programs and be, the centre of attention in them. So I think that's one of the reasons why he has come back to run as an MP. So he can basically get on this scene and raise his profile significantly. Jim, I haven't really got too much more to say on that. Have you got anything else you want to add?
No.
Cool. Just a few more segments to go. We said last week, next segment, we said last week when we were talking about national service, I don't really want to talk about national service this week because we went into a lot of detail to it about last week. The only thing I would say is I recently made a tweet saying that I think also the reason why it's 30,000 places for the armed forces is because Biden wants all European countries in NATO to maintain the 30,000 minimum response force that can be fielded, which is required for their NATO membership in these recruits would basically be on paper that response force. That's the only thing I'd really have to add to the national service thing. And also, this policy is attracting a bit of attention because young people are coming up to Rishi Sunak asking why he hates young people. But, Jim, you and I, we did talk about this in depth. We did say that this will be one of the first of many policies that they throw to see what sticks to the wall.
Yeah.
And we've had a lot more of them. Obviously, Kemi Badenoch's been talking about this SJW culture war issues, like transgender stuff, to see if that can get them votes. I'm not getting into the validity, any validity or invalidity of the arguments. She's just trying this on to try and muster up votes for the Tories any way she can. Michael Gove, who has done a video, which is really funny because he's standing down, giving another 3, which is increased sentences for fly tipping, landlords being given yet another abstract reason, which is very much open to subjective interpretation to be able to evict people, being that if you are disruptive to the community. Mind you, Jim, as well, when we were talking, he was saying that, if that law wasn't going to be abused, that would be actually quite a good one.
Yeah, but most of the laws tend to be abused, so even a law that was designed to help you, someone will find a way to use it to fuck you up.
Well, the thing is as well, like, the landlords have a financial interest in having as many mechanisms as possible to be able to evict people. Why not make it so the police or the council can force the landlord to evict someone if there's enough complaints going on? Because the police or the council wouldn't have a financial interest in evicting that person. The person who does have a financial interest in evictions, again, is the landlord, because they can evict someone and then get someone else in to pay a higher rent on a higher contract. So I don't think that policy is going to be too popular. I've said the fly tipping one, haven't I? Which was increased sentences for fly tipping. They want to talk about larger fines, or infinite fines rather, so that the fine can go as high as they want, depending on the severity of it, the severity of the amount of fly tipping you do. And I think prison was discussed in the video as well. And also a policy which is a small bit of aid towards energy bills, but it's not the policy people want. In relation to energy, what people want are price caps on what energy companies can charge the consumer, and they want price cap. And what they also want now more than ever is for taxes on the shareholders in the energy industry, and also they want energy. And if they can't have that, they would also rather have energy companies renationalized as a whole. So this little policy isn't really going to help.
Yeah.
So again, there's probably some more out, but they are just throwing random policies to stick to the wall to see which one can be a headline. I actually agree with what Alistair Campbell said when he said if you want to have a successful election, get 3 major headlines of important issues, like say NHS, immigration, economy, I don't know, 3 of them, and just run with them through the campaign. And neither party seems to really be doing that. But you have to pick an issue that someone cares about. And these are 3 issues. These are 3 specific policies that people are just going to roll their eyes at.
Yeah, you see, what you described would be the smart option to do, but we know none of them are fucking smart.
Mm-hmm. Labour as well have also unleashed a new policy, and this one's causing quite a stir. They want to tax private schools. We call them public schools in the UK because members of the public fund them. So if I call them public schools, I mean private schools. Just a cultural thing. Sometimes it's just a slip. But Jim and I will be talking about private schools. What we call in other countries, what they call public schools, we call state schools, state-funded schools. So those are the ones that most of the population go to, state schools. Public schools are for the richer kids. So Starmer wants to basically tax them and also remove their charitable status. And this is scaring the shit out of the Tories. And it's also scaring the shit out of the private schools, who have been making a shitload of money in the past years. And before you ask, why do they have charity status? Because they handpick a few poor kids and let them attend. And some of the arguments to try and villainize this, like, state schools will get overloaded if they shut down private schools. That's a pretty weak argument, because state schools are more or less already overloaded. And the system just seems to be, oh, we'll find a classroom we can shove them in anyway. In Finland, private schools, or public schools as I refer to them as private schools, they're banned because of the unfair advantage they give the rich.
Yeah, all I can say is that when I was studying, we all on a state school, or the equivalent of state school here in England, we didn't have room for all of us. So basically, the way the Greek public resolved is they ordered plastic containers, the things that you use to load shit into ships. So, you know, kibos, I think they're called. There might be also a word, kibo. Basically a big plastic container that you use to store stuff, and you often use that to store stuff and then load that up to a ship to be shipped. So they ordered a few of these and convert the inside to an actual classroom.
Wow.
Yeah. So basically, we studied on storage space, storage space container.
My
And
goodness.
obviously, during winter, it was fucking cold. So you had basic electricity in there, and you had an aircon unit. But yeah, it was an experience.
True. It sounds like it. Just going back to
And by the
this.
sound of it, it might be something that the UK might actually do if
I mean,
they continue with that stance. I mean, this is supposing that the proposed tax the public schools go ahead, which
I
will
hope it does,
result
to be
in
honest.
flooding the the state schools, in which case they might actually start employing storage container units. But I have a feeling that this will not go as quiet as it did in Greece, because no one but an eye in Greece. I mean, everyone was annoyed, everyone complained, but the complaints were ignored and it was left
Well,
there.
it kind of highlights the relationship that public schools should have with state schools, and that public schools, if they're going to exist and give this unfair advantage to the rich, they should be giving a lot more to state education with the sheer amount of money they make. I mean, some of these schools have fucking shooting ranges. They have that much money, and they are raking it in.
That's insane.
Yeah, like they are raking it in, and they justify it by saying, "Oh well, we're a charity and we give back to the stateside education by taking handfuls of poorer children. That's how we give back." No, they should be taxed, and the money taken from them should be invested into state schools. If the rich want the privilege, if we're going to have this, because I don't think Starmer will get rid of public schools, it's not going to happen. So to make the best of it, if we're going to have politicians that are not going to get rid of these public schools, then we should tax them until they squeak and invest that money into state schools and improve the situation of education in the UK for everybody. That's what I would do anyway. If you're not going to get away with shutting them down, or if you're not going to be able to shut them down, I think taxing them is a good idea. And you can tell that the public schools are getting scared when they had GB News running riot, basically saying, "Oh, it'll be a disaster. It'll destroy the education system as a whole." That they should be they should be taxed, and the money that they make from the people who fund them. Bearing in mind as well that during the pandemic, instead of going off mock examinations initially, teachers were allowed to select the grades for their students, and they started quantifying the grades and made the grades finite. So only X amount of A's could be delivered, only X amount of B's could be allowed. Only X amount of A's could be distributed, only X amount of B's could be distributed. So naturally, the private schools were allowed to give out all the A's and the B's and things, and the state schools were getting hammered. So they immediately had to change it after that because it was just so bloody unfair. Like it was absurd. So I think, I mean, that's just one horror story, but I do think that these schools, like I said, I stand by what I said. These schools should be taxed, and the money should be then reinvested in state schools because they make a lot of money. Because they don't only just get the fees from the rich kids. They don't only just get that. They are forever getting donations because they have charity status. So politicians and just rich people in general, millionaires, billionaires, will invest in these schools because it's a charity status. So their donations can be written off as a tax deductible, and the school and the actual the public schools make so much money off of that. I would even change that. Get rid of the charity status and say, hey, you rich people, you like investing in schools and colleges, and you like to do it. I know you like to do it with your favorites, but if you want a tax deduction, why not invest in state schools? We'll set up a fund that you can donate to. I know that's your favorite, but you'll get a tax deduction off here. Maybe try and entice people that way, but I think that, yeah, for me, taxing state public schools and removing their charity status, I think that's a good idea. What do you think?
I think that is a great idea, and I'm surprised that no one thought about it. And then again,
It's been
if the schools are private and they hedge funds, if they're private, maybe some of it actually returns back to people who donated somehow with some weird, stupid, obscure law or whatever.
Yep. There's also we can't go into too much detail about this one because, and I'm sure not because of opinions or anything, Jim, but because Keir Starmer hasn't said anything about this. There is a rumor. So this Labour Party have not said anything. Have said this. This is a rumor about them. So the rumor about them is once they get elected, they are going to introduce a wealth tax. I'd be all for that if they do it, but we can't say that they're going to or not going to because they haven't commented in a lot of detail. There's all kinds going about saying, oh, they're trying to pass themselves off as rich so they can win the majority. Then they're going to do what they want. I wouldn't mind a wealth tax either, but that's all I really have to say on that segment. We're on the last one now, Jim. It's going to be a quick one just for a laugh. Is there anything you want to say about public schools any further, or you ready to move on to the last one?
I'm ready to move on.
Okay, so the last one is a bit of a laugh. There is a Conservative MP called Robert Logan. He is in a constituency and he enjoys a majority of 594 votes. That's it, 594 votes. So he's a bit concerned he's going to lose his seat. He's recently tried to pass himself off as a Labour candidate. While he does explain in the tweet that he's trying to win over traditional Labour voters, most people are not going to read that. And they're only going to show the imagery, which I'll post now. And I direct Jim to the poster, the image that I showed you, the Labour for Logan. That absolutely reeks. You just glance at that, that's going to reek of, yeah, that guy's got to be a Labour MP. Like, he is trying to pass himself off as a Labour MP there.
He's going to try.
He's going to try, but the police are investigating his ass now. Yeah, the police are investigating him for election fraud. I mean, they want to. The Tories have been doing this for a while. They've sent out leaflets that are green to try and... Because in Britain, each party has like a designated colour. So the Labour are red, Tories are blue, the Green Party is, green, Liberal Democrats are yellow. So and they have symbols as well, but the pamphlets usually contain that colour dominantly. If someone sees a green leaflet with a candidate that they've never seen before with their name on, the Green Party voters might actually vote for this person without realising they're a Conservative candidate, not Green Party candidate. So this is a disgusting thing to do. In addition, at one point, a lot of Conservative politicians like Jacob Rees-Mogg, Liz Truss, and even Rishi Sunak, they were taking Conservative out of their Twitter profiles to try and build up their individual reputation and their individual brand over that being just a Conservative MP.
Wow.
Yeah, like it was Carol Vorderman that spotted that back in the day. Lee Anderson did it as well. So they have got a history of doing this to try and fool voters into voting for them. And they've done it in pamphlets, but they didn't used to usually do it on social media. Like, I mean, obviously the removing of Conservative from their Twitter bio. Yeah, I can see that. But they wouldn't get posters of themselves and plaster it on fucking Twitter. And I think this shows just how fucked they all know they are. Like, this is absolutely a sign of defeat.
Yeah, don't see him going very far.
No. I would laugh if he gets arrested. But it's like, I'm 594 votes majority. I'm probably not going to win my seat this time. What can I do? I'll pretend to be a Labour MP, because that'll work. On a side note, in my city, where Jim, you and I will be voting, because, well, it's not my city, it's our city, but where we vote, Jim, the leaflets will actually have the party logo on them. So it'll have X Labour, B Tory or Conservative with the party symbols. So I wonder if it's trying to plant in the person's brain, go off the name, not off the party. I mean, Liz Truss is definitely trying to build her own brand.
Yeah.
There are people that... Oh, yeah. I mean, there are people who do that. George Galloway, for example, is very much someone who has his own brand. He's always going to be able to win a seat in any election. He'll find a way to feed off of the current ongoing issues, utilize them to get elected, and he'll be able to win that way. I mean, when he got his constituency this year, he sent pamphlets to different voter groups with different things on that contradicted each other. So he knew how to get elected, and he got elected because he's George Galloway. Diane Abbott, to be honest, might get turned into that. Not George Galloway, I mean, she might get turned into someone who can get elected based on her individuality over being Labour because of what she's gone through this election, with all of this stuff about being banned and everything. So she might be a successful independent. But just going back on topic, this shouldn't be allowed. I mean, Jim, is this like something out of Greece?
Yeah, that's totally that happens in Greece all the time.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
They pretend to be from the other party.
Okay, not strictly pretend, but as soon as their party loses, they just have two options. Either they make their own party, go independent, or they jump to the opposing party like nothing happened straight away. It's like, you know, this meme where, well, actually not a meme, but you know, like some very old and non-famous FPS competitive games that, you know, suddenly it's 6 versus 6, for example, and your team is losing, and then you could press escape, and there's like a change team option, so everyone would go into the winning team to get the win.
Oh, yeah.
It's like that in Greek politics. So it's not the case that they pretend they're being the opposite party. It's more of the case that they change and then they pretend they were never part of the party, because it's quite funny, you know. It's like, imagine this: Labour is for 4 years elected, does a bunch of shit. Then some prime ministers from Labour switch over to the Conservative side, and they become the opposition, blaming Labour, even though they themselves were in Labour when they were in power, but they still blame them. Can you imagine the irony in this?
I
It's
know.
like, you're blaming Labour, but you were part of Labour when this happened. Like, yeah, that's what the Greek politicians do. Or they make their own political party with very obscure, because, you know, you have the party that's like the full name, and you also have the initials that tend to form some sort of stupid word.
Yeah.
Some genius had the idea of making the initials to spell penis in Greek, or something close to that, and it's like, is this on purpose, or are you an actually idiot and didn't see that this spells penis? Anyways, lots and lots of shit like that. Or rather, our right political party at some point had a logo of a hand with a hand holding a, how do you call it, like a pyre. But the way the pyre was designed, it was shaped like a dildo. So people took that and animated the hand going up and down in a stroking, very fast motion. To make the fire brighter. So yeah, there's been all sorts of shit that happened into the Greek scene of politics. So what you described there, pretending to be someone else when you are under someone else, it's just Tuesday for us.
I mean, you get some of that in the UK as well. But beyond that, I don't really have too much to say, and that was the last of the subjects. We'll talk about Nigel Farage either next week or later on this week, just because he decided to change his mind. One thing I will say is, why is it okay for Nigel Farage to change his mind when it comes to becoming an MP? And he's right, he can change his mind if he wants, but why is he so against the population having the opportunity to change their mind with a referendum to go back into the EU? Why is he allowed to change his mind, but everyone else isn't?
Because it's the difference between the two acts. The amount of paperwork it requires to get back into the EU versus the amount of paperwork it requires for Nigel Farage to change his mind into becoming an MP is significantly higher.
I just mean the principle. He's absolutely against a referendum for going into the EU.
You're missing one big important point. We're talking about
You'll lose
politics.
it, I know.
We're talking about politics. There are no principles.
True. And
principles are more like a guide, kind of like the laws. After you earn a certain amount of money and above, laws are not actually laws. It's more like a, you know, a guide for you to follow. More like a suggestion, if you like.
But
And the more money you earn, the more suggestive the laws are.
True.
Other than being enforced.
Also, as well, I'm just on that. You said he had no principles. There was talk that he was actually going to do a deal with the Conservatives, and I wonder if maybe he was trying to get a referendum for the EU off the table, or he was making some kind of deal saying Reform wouldn't field a candidate in certain constituencies. And the Tories have looked at Reform and just thought, you know what, these guys are not UKIP, and that's such a non. This is, this isn't 2016. You know, the Tories are such an Reform are such a non-threat that there's no deal being made with them. And also maybe the Donald Trump guilty verdict is factored in here as well. And he doesn't want to be associated with a convicted felon, because I'm not like, obviously what we said about Trump in the other video we did. I don't want to go into Trump on this podcast, but the convicted felon that's going to change people's wanting to have an association with him, because now that, and that's what was so damaging about this. That's going to change people's association with him for some people, and maybe Farage has done a massive U-turn and just thought, no, I can't be associated with a convicted felon president because I want to, I might want to run to be an MP, so I'll just do it now, type thing, instead of going over to the US. So
yeah, potentially.
Yeah. Also, it needs to be said as well, how we were talking about Carl Benjamin before. Nigel Farage was his best. Well, they weren't best mates, but Nigel Farage was taking photographs and shaking his hand and everything. And then he ignored the "I wouldn't even rape you" comments that Carl Benjamin made. Again, they were foul. But Nigel Farage, because Carl Benjamin thought that UKIP was on his side, Nigel Farage was the first one to turn on him. This is what I suspect, to be honest. I suspect that Nigel Farage did not like the fact that he wasn't leader of UKIP, so he used Carl Benjamin to destroy UKIP from the inside so he could start his own party. I think it was the Brexit party at the time. He's been in that many. And he could start his own party, be leader in it, because he wasn't leader of UKIP anymore. And all of the UKIP people that weren't happy with Benjamin's involvement would just hop over to the Brexit party. And I think that's why he did it, but that's a podcast in itself. The point I want to make is Nigel Farage has a history of selecting an issue, creating a party like UKIP, like Brexit, and getting them to a certain height, and then just abandoning them and leaving them to it. And I'm actually quite surprised that he's became leader of Reform and ran as a Reform MP. Because, you and I used to talk about him having a cushy job with GB News and stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, Jim, I've dragged this on a lot. We'll go into Nigel Farage in a lot more detail, maybe this week or next week. But that's the end of episode 2 of the Circus of Fools. We hope you found it enjoyable. Unless, Jim, you've got anything else you want to add to any of the subjects? Anything you want to say?
No.
Oh, fair enough. I'm Jonathan, and I'm here with my co-host, Jim.
Hello.
And remember to like, share, subscribe. Don't hit the dislike. There's no point. The algorithm just hides them. So if you disagree, feel free to leave a comment. Jim does love to argue. And don't forget to hit the share, subscribe. Even, like I said, disagree in the comments if you want. It all helps us out. It's all traffic. And we'll be back next week with episode 3 of the Circus of Fools. Remember, guys, find your voting IDs, because you won't be able to vote without them.
Yep.